Hello, everyone. I'm Nishant Patel. I'm the co founder and CTO at Contentstack.
And what is Content Stack? Let's start by understanding the business.
Sure. Contentstack is a content management system, right? So you can think of any brands or any company in the world. Um, they basically interact with their end users through content. So it could be, on the web channel or the mobile or maybe even digital signages. So we provide software all in the cloud that lets these big, large brands manage and deliver content.
Okay. Uh, the term that describes Content Stack there's this website called Traction, which is a website where you track startups, is that it's a headless CMS. What does that term mean? Headless CMS.
Sure,
CMS is,
yeah. I
of course,
mean,
content management system. What does the word headless there mean?
yeah. So we pioneered this sort of category called headless CMS, and like going back in sort of the early web days, there was only one channel, which is the web, right? And there were a bunch of CMS companies that came about for sort of the smaller websites. You typically have like WordPress users, and for the large enterprises, companies use like Sitecore and Tridian and AEM. This is I'm talking the early 2000s, right, where it was just the web channel. We saw an
AEM is
opportunity.
an Adobe product, I think.
Sure, yeah, it's the Adobe Experience Manager.
Okay.
And
Okay.
large companies use that software. And it was only the web channel back then, right? So my journey kind of as a software engineer started in 2000, and in 2007 when I looked at the cloud, I think I signed up for AWS in 2006 actually. So Amazon Web Services, the cloud, right? And it blew me
One
away.
question.
And
Okay,
yeah,
so, uh, you started as a software engineer in India or in the US? Like where did you grow up?
yeah. So I grew up in India. I was born in India, but
Hmm.
I moved to the US when I was 14. So I did my high school and college and all that in the US.
Like your parents moved there, or
No, so basically, they my aunt actually applied for a visa when I was born, and she had already moved to the U.S. back in like the 70s or something, right?
wow?
And
Okay.
when it took like 14 years for the visa to come around, and then my parents definitely they want to move to the U.S., so they asked me the
Hmm.
question: if you want to move,
Hmm.
you have to stay with your
Hmm.
cousin.
Hmm.
I was like, sure, and I hadn't met the cousin, but I was like, this is like
And were
92,
you
right? So
like in a big city or small city? Like what was the in India? Like what was your
oh, in
exposure level
India.
before? Yeah.
No, in India, I was in Mumbai, but I
Okay.
spent quite a bit of years in Rajasthan in a boarding school. So out
Okay.
of the 14 years, I think like 6 7 years I was in a boarding
Hmm.
school.
Hmm. Hmm. So
So
your aunt applied for a visa for you, and
yeah, she applied for the visa. I think in '92, the visa came in, and I had the option to move. Or my parents, gave me the option to move to the U.S. In to a town called Columbus, Ohio. It's the middle of America, and my cousin, who had migrated there like 10 years prior, was also still trying to make it as an immigrant in the U.S. But that's the place I would have ended up, right? And I totally took it because I think I was very like drawn to technology in the 80s in India, and then few things trickled in. I think at that time, like an Atari 2600, like gaming and some small computers here and there, and I was just like drawn to it. And my dad had bought me like World Book Encyclopedia. It's like the set of
hmm.
like 24 books, right? A lot of us that grew up in the 80s probably remember that, and most of that is the content was all from America, and there's a lot of technology, and then I was drawn to that. And so when the time came, and the option was there, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll move there. So that's how I ended up
And
in the States. Yeah.
Okay, okay, and of course you're a Patel, and there is a very strong Patel community in the states. I think they're typically known to run motels. I think.
I I was I thought you were going to ask me about the motel. So you have to, and you cannot go through like you have to. Basically, I tell everyone I hit all the stereotypes of a Patel in America. I moved to America. I work at a convenience store, and
Okay.
then my cousin buys a motel, and I work at a motel, and then eventually
Oh
you end up
wow.
as a doctor or a techie. So I've checked all those boxes.
Okay, okay, okay. So, where did you start working then? As a once you finished your, like, probably you did a BS or an MS or something in computer
Yeah,
science.
I did a BS from Ohio State University, and I graduated in 2000. So, I was drawn, like I said, I was drawn to tech, and also, just growing up as a Patel, I think, everyone around you is just always talking about business. And I think, when I was growing up, I looked up to my dad, who had a few businesses here and there. I wanted to start a business, so I kind of put both those things together. And in college, I started a business. Um, well, I started a business, but I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I knew how to build a product, so I built something like a Spotify playlist player or something like that, right? In college,
Okay.
but no idea how to go to market and all that. And so I
This
graduated,
was during the
and
Napster
then
days. I mean, when you were in
absolutely,
college, your peers would have been using Napster for music, I guess.
absolutely, it was Napster, and then there was a company called Real Audio, I believe, that started
Yeah.
streaming
Okay.
services on
Okay.
the web. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. So can I just like use API to start streaming audio and then let users create playlists and things like that, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, way too early for the market to be
Hmm. Hmm.
ready
Hmm.
for that type of
Hmm.
technology. So, of course, no go to market. So I ended up, after graduation, you got to make money. So
Hmm.
I got a job in San Francisco. So I flew out to San Francisco from there. So I started my
And
journey,
where did you
like I
join?
would say, I joined a startup. Like growing up in Ohio, I was like, hey, if I get like $35,000, it's like, man, that's gonna be a lot of money, right? And then you had a couple of like young startups in San Francisco like show up and it's like, hey, I'll give you double the money. I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, deal. And I go out to San Francisco, right? Till you get the first paycheck and you're like, what the heck? Where's all the money, Uh,
Yeah.
so
As
yeah,
in,
so I
the money was going in taxes, or there was like a ESOP component, or what? Like,
there was an ESOP component. The money was going on taxes because the more money you make, I think your brackets change, and so those calculations don't apply, and you got to, pay more taxes. And also,
hmm.
I moved to San Francisco in 2000. So it was the dot com like boom, right?
Yeah.
I called up like 50 apartment places to get an apartment. Finally got one, and it was like $2,000 back then.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I had to get two-bedroom because my sister was going to move from India. Um,
Okay.
so I think all of that, and it's like first paycheck I get, and I'm like, man, what is this?
Hmm.
And also I had like a big, like I started with like negative $40,000. It wasn't student loans because I think my dad paid for it. I was just like stupid and spent a lot of money on credit cards in college.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, so yeah, the dot com was interesting. It was the best time to be in San Francisco, I think, because there was a lot going on and the excitement around the internet, right? And there was this um, this like sense that the tech can kind of change the world, and I felt that. I mean, San Francisco was like amazing in the 2000 till the dot com bust happened. So
And like, what was your company? What's the product that they were building where you spent like those 7 years?
yeah, so I joined them and they didn't have a product still, right? So they had this idea of like managing all the different racks in like a retail store. Okay, so like the whole management of that is like a whole nother world. And so they wanted to build software to work with these large brands, large retailers, to manage all the digital, not the digital, the physical racks and things like that, right? So we started. So I basically started to. I think I wrote the first line of code for this company. It was called Wise Connect, and
Okay.
they got funding, and then they added a bunch of people. Um, so I mean, this kind of story goes back. The first year with Wise Connect, I worked there for like maybe 5 6 months, and I'm like, hey man, I can you give me more money? Because there's a bunch of people knocking on my door that they're gonna give me like 30% more, right? And the founder's just like, no, that we can't give you the money. So I was all right, I quit. I'm gonna go to this other company that's like 200 people. Got this fancy office in downtown San Francisco, and so I switched and I went there. And in a month, that company shuts down. So
Oh, okay.
that's when I realized like the dot com like bust. It was so fast. In 2 weeks, like the whole like San Francisco south of market, if for the folks that have been there, it was the kind of all the startups over there. Everything was just like boarded up
Hmm.
in like less than a month, like end of
Wow.
2000.
Hmm.
It was funny, I walked into early in the morning. You walk in uh, to the office, and these guys were like drinking beer and playing pool and stuff like that. And I was so naive. I'm like, did we go public or what? Because in those days, like you don't need to have revenue. You could just put like .com to your name and
Yeah,
list
yeah,
it
yeah.
listed public,
Yeah.
right? So, but no, they said the company shut down, and I'm like, why are you guys like partying? It's like, oh, we'll just get another job next door. This like that was just
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
oblivious to what was happening in the market. And as soon as I
Hmm.
walked out, I think the jobs were gone.
Hmm.
So it was a very hard sort of month. I think one of sort of the worst times I would say in my career. Um,
Hmm.
but if looking back, I would be like, that was kind of the best lesson I learned, and it helped me with entrepreneurship way down the line.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah,
And then, like, did you land on your feet?
I did. So uh, I'm at that point I was an extreme introvert, right? So I didn't really make a lot of connections, but the few connections that I had, I kind of called them up, and then one of my friends said, "Hey, there's a job at this company called Tipco, which is also, it was started by an Indian founder that had moved to the States when he was young, and he pioneered this technology called the information bus, which was like, you know, publish, subscribe, for the techies out there. He's one of the inventors of that, and he started a company in the integration space where these large enterprises, when they buy, you know, these ERP software, like HR systems and finance and supply chain, you got to move data between these systems, right? So you need
Hmm.
another set of software, integration software that kind of helps with that, right? So he
Hmm.
pioneered that, and one of my friends got me an interview there, and so you know the interview was pretty straightforward because I just showed them all the work that I had done. Even the company that I started in college, I had a product which was way far ahead than what anyone else was doing. So I did get a job there, and then one of the recruiters, I still remember, I got a job at Nvidia, and
Wow.
they would have, where's Nvidia today? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I went with Tipco, so I got
Hmm.
two jobs. I landed okay. The problem though is that at Tipco, like just within a month, this is like December 1st, 2000, I got the job. Like I said, 2 weeks before, it was like the worst time, like the bottom for me, because I had to take care of my sister and pay for all the credit cards and all sorts of stuff, right? And then a month into that job, Tipco started laying off people, and I was just like, oh my god, like I don't want to live through this again, right? So I was always a hard worker, but I think that just like said, I'm not gonna get laid off here, right? And Tipco, I think, every few months started laying off people. So it wasn't just like the first. I think it went through like 8 or 10. I can't remember. rounds of layoffs after like 2000, 2001. I think it all continued to 2003 because in the middle, 2001, September 11 happened. And
Right.
that also just kind of further drove the market down, right? So it was a pretty interesting time to be in tech after the dot com bust. And that was my start of the career,
Hmm.
right?
And you were building products there, or what? This is a
Yeah,
services company. What it sounds like they do bespoke projects. Like when a company is buying bunch of tools, then they will do the integration between those tools. So it's a services business, right?
no, no, it's a product. It was a product business. And so
Okay.
you can imagine companies like FedEx and Cisco and Costco and all these guys, they have, uh, these like huge like software systems that have purchased to get more value out of those systems have to talk to each other. And so
Right.
TIBCO made the glue software between these
Okay.
ERP systems. So it was pretty deep sort of engineering kind of challenge and work and the solution that we built. To answer your
Which
question, I did get a job in the core engineering team.
okay, which
Yeah,
is what today like a Zapier is doing, like a uh, is doing a version for smaller companies.
absolutely.
So okay, this market is called iPaaS, right?
It's
Integration
called
platform
iPaaS.
as a service.
Yeah,
Of course, that
it's
that time probably the name wasn't coined yet, right? Like when you were building it.
yeah, it's because there's no at that time there was no like service like
Hmm.
software as a service, right?
Right,
I
right,
think
right, right.
Salesforce had just started and they
Hmm.
said we will deliver software and they called it I think application service interface or sorry application service provider. They
Yeah,
weren't
yeah,
calling
yeah. I
it
remember that. There
SaaS,
was a phrase, ASP. Yeah, I remember that.
ASP,
Application
yeah.
service provider. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm,
So they weren't calling it like SaaS yet, right?
hmm, hmm, hmm,
Um,
hmm,
so the iPads kind of came way later.
hmm,
Um,
hmm, hmm,
so I worked for this company for 6 years,
hmm.
and my I definitely did well because I just like went all in. Just I didn't look at the time and I just went in and it was interesting work and I was working with some amazing people, really smart people. So I learned a lot. And then fast forward to 2006, I looked or signed up for the service called Amazon Web Services, and
For
I was
Tipco.
blown away. For TIPCO, yeah, for
Okay.
TIPCO, I signed.
Hmm.
Well, as an engineer, I would always explore. I was
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interested in product. I was building product, so I would always keep in touch with a lot of the new things that were happening. There were companies like 37 Signals that
Hmm,
make a product called Basecamp. So this
hmm.
like SaaS economy was just starting, right? And
Right.
so I was tuned into that, and
Hmm,
then Amazon decides to release this service called Amazon Web Services with one or two services like for the techies out there, EC2. And basically what that was is like you literally just log in and say start a server, and it just starts a server.
hmm,
And before that, you had to have a lot of capital investment to buy a server and host that server in a data center, right? So my mind was blown. I was like, holy shit, like this is amazing, right? And then I tried to evangelize that within TIPCO. And I was young at that time and I just like, what are these guys like? They're not seeing where this is gonna go. And a little bit impatient, right? And so I said, you know what? I'm just gonna quit. I'm gonna start what I called at that time was integration on the web. That's kind of the precursor to the iPaaS, integration platform as a service, right?
hmm.
So that I quit in 2007. So it took me a year or so, and I was married by that time, and my wife said, she's also an entrepreneur. She's actually the CEO of Contentstack right now, where we still work together. She had started another business which failed in 2001. It was my
Okay.
time around. She's like, I'll keep the job, let the money come in, and you can go, start this iPads
Is she
thing.
also a techie, or like?
She no, she is tuned into the tech world, but she comes, her skills are more on the
Go to
biz
market.
dev,
Okay.
marketing, yeah, just the go to
Hmm.
market side. So it's a really good,
Match.
partnership
Yeah.
between us, right?
Hmm.
But in that 2007, she was just like basically said, "Hey, it's your turn. Go do your thing," and she'll keep her job. And then it so happened in 2007, my uncle passed away in India, and I came to India right after I quit, right? And one of the folks I know here in a suburb called Virar in Mumbai, there's a college called Viva, and uh, one of our friends or my dad's friend asked me to go and deliver a seminar to a bunch of students. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. And this is where internet was just kind of taking off in India at that time. So they were curious to know what's going on in tech, right? In the US, it would take I would say like a few years for the tech to make it to India. Nowadays everything shows up instantly.
Right.
Um, so I did that, and then after that seminar, I told the folks that I'm starting a business. I want to build an integration software, and a couple of guys said, "Hey, after the talk, like, can we join you?" And I'm like, "Really? You want to join me?" I'm like, all right, how much you want to get paid? It's like 10,000 rupees. I was like, that's a conversion in my head, and I'm like, all right, I can afford that. You two are hired,
Right. Right.
and I got lucky there because I think these individuals were extremely smart, extremely hardworking. They're still with me, over the years, almost 17 plus years. So yeah, that was awesome, and
Okay.
that's the start of
How,
my journey
how
back
did
in India.
that AWS epiphany? You had an epiphany when you saw AWS that this is the future of the web. How did that lead to you wanting to do an iPaaS?
Yeah, so I was, and it wasn't just the cloud sort of thing because I think Salesforce had already started what like you said, it was called the ASP, right? Application
Hmm.
Service Provider. So it was kind of the precursor to like SaaS software, and there were a few tools like that coming out. I remember there was something called Wufoo.com, which was like a form builder
Okay.
application. There was a bunch of them coming out, and I was just very curious you know and I would always try to reverse engineer of how they built these softwares. And then when Amazon came out, and then they put in their pricing, I'm like, man, you can just like start this and have a production software without much capital investment. I wouldn't say I knew what the future was going to be. I think it was like connecting all these dots. And I think the thing that I'm like, okay, there's a bunch of cloud-based software coming, not cloud-based, ASP type of software coming up where you don't have
Hmm.
to install anything. And then there's this like cloud now that's gonna just make it very easy to start servers. So I kind of just like put two and two together, and I was like, all right, it's gonna be an explosion of these applications, right? Because you don't need that capital investment. And so I was like, well, if it's the same problem, that had before the cloud with all the software that these enterprises had, which was installed in the data center, you still have to connect those, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm an expert in that. So why don't we just build a integration software that's also entirely in the cloud? So you don't have to install anything, right? So that was kind of the rough idea.
Okay.
It took me
Okay.
a long
Like,
time to get to that product though.
mm,
Yeah.
so essentially, like you gave the example of that form building software. So like
Vufu.
this, there would be hundreds of softwares that people would use. So like a company might use some software for lead gen where potential leads are filling the form. Now, for that to enter Salesforce would need some integration, and so therefore
Absolutely.
you saw that opportunity to build a cloud native iPaaS which could work with these hundreds of the explosion of SaaS which you saw coming could work with them. Okay,
Ab-
understood. Understood. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did
So
you? 2007 is when that whole Lehman crash was happening. Like really bad time to start a business. Like uh, did you want to raise funds to build the product first? Because typically SaaS needs upfront investment. You need to spend on product. You need to spend on go to market. It takes maybe a year or two before you start reaching revenues that can at least take care of payroll. So how did you how did you build that?
Yeah, I think all those words that you mentioned, I had no idea how to do any of those. Okay, that's what I would say. I think, I was just at a talk this morning, at a WeWork, just like a developer event. I'm like just amazed by how, younger folks know all those things. Go to market is important. How do you raise
Mm.
capital? All those things. I mean, they were like, I'm like, wow, we've come a long way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Back in
true, true, true.
2007,
Yeah.
there were people raising capital and all that, but I was just like, I was an introvert, so I didn't necessarily, talk to a lot of folks. I read a lot. I was just a geek. I would consume a lot of tech stuff, and then I would have these like ideas of where the world is going. But you know, being an introvert, the whole VC thing, presenting to them was just like terrifying to me. Okay, so I knew the VC world, and just the fact that I had to go and present and raise capital and sell the idea was like terrifying to me. So I did what I know best, is I know to build software, right? So that's where I started. And then to bring the money in to start a company, even to pay those two guys that I ran into in India, um, I was like, well, I can develop software, and there was, in the 6 years at Tipco, I had made enough connections there. Plus, Tipco's customers, they all knew me as, okay, Nishant, just get stuff done. So the marketing department of Tipco were kind of the early adopters of the cloud, because I sold them on like, hey, you can like cut your cost tremendously if you move some of your workload to the cloud. And this friend of mine at Tipco said, all right, we'll give you a project, right? So then we started down that journey of like just getting really good at cloud
Mm.
and helping these customers move to the cloud. Whoever would take the chance to like move some workloads to the cloud. It wasn't everyone. It took a while for a bunch of people to come on the cloud, but there were definitely like, on the fringes of these big companies, that some people that wanted to move fast, they were open to take a chance. And we were actually, I would say, and I would claim this, I don't know how to prove this, but we were one of the first companies in India to do cloud implementations for customers. This is back in 2007, right? So it's way
Mm.
early.
Right.
And Amazon, we were, I think, the one of the five advanced partners in like 2008. There's a
Wow.
company called Raw Engineering that I started,
Mm.
and Amazon was very small. We went to the event; it was like 150 people, right? Very small. And now it's like thousands, right? So yeah, it's. I got on there. There was a bunch of people that I knew that basically said, "Hey, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be faster. Let's try it." Right. So we went down the whole services route, if you will, instead of building a product that I wanted to build.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming your uh, business development would have happened by virtue of Amazon making you a partner. Amazon would have needed companies like you who help their customers to adopt the cloud. So, I mean, or did you also have to like hustle and get business beyond that first TIPCO
Nah, I
contract?
didn't know anything. I didn't even know the
Mm.
partner ecosystem, and they could help with the channel. And I think some folks at Amazon knew us, I would say. We were advanced partner and listed on their website. I think some business did trickle in through that. But even they were new. They didn't have a full partner team. Amazon
Right.
became Amazon like, I think after like 2010, 2011. It took them a few years. People forget that. It took them a few years to get to uh, that scale. And so we were going alongside them in the early journey, and we didn't move millions of dollars of revenue from typical data centers to Amazon, but it was over the years, right?
Mm.
And I wasn't, like I said, I was still new to business, so I didn't really understand that I could just kind of work with them and get the business kind of going. I basically depended on the network that I had, and I think the word of mouth. I got a few customers in Silicon Valley like big large companies as customers for the services side of things. And I was busy myself because I was personally a programmer, and I'm programming as well as doing the business, trying to get the money in. That went on for a while. And then of course the mobile showed up. iPhone shows up in 2008. It's like, oh man, this is crazy. So we started doing app development. Again, I'll make this claim: one of the first companies to do app development out of India in
Mm.
2008, 2009 timeframe. So we were quick to adopt new technologies. And then as we were helping people move to the cloud, the typical way of companies would move things to the cloud was like, hey, I have this like software that I'm installing locally in a data center. Can you just lift it and shift it and install it in the cloud server, right? And we did that. And I'm fast forwarding to content stack now. It's As we were doing that, these marketing teams that I would work with, it's like, hey, can you take my site core or WordPress and move it to the cloud and run it on that server? So we did a few of those projects, and it was painful. First, mobile showed up, and they were only catering to the web channel. So the way it was built, it was very tightly coupled. um, that was an issue. The second issue is they're just installing the software. So anytime a new version comes in, they have to upgrade. And
Mm.
what cloud provider was, it changed the way you delivered software. It's like electricity, it just comes in. Even if they upgrade their uh, grids and all, you don't change anything within your house, right? The lights still work. That's cloud basically. So you essentially had to rewrite software to work in the cloud. But a lot of these big companies, they just didn't want to change, you know. And so I said, well, there's web channel, now there's a mobile channel, and it doesn't take a genius to basically say there's going to be more channels where content has to be delivered. Cloud software like CMS needs to be rewritten for the cloud. And I called it simple CMS at that time, simple content management systems. It's like, hey, can we just like create a database, put some APIs. APIs are basically a way to talk to these, software systems, and then pull that content out and create that web page, and then pull that content out and create the mobile app. So you're kind of decoupling content from the experience, which is the web and the mobile, and thereby you could basically create whatever experience. It could be a digital signage or kiosk. Doesn't matter. Your content is separate, and you manage that in the cloud, right? So it was like very different, and I'm lucky, there's a few folks wanted content management, and they said, Nishant, I don't care what you do in the background. I sold them this idea. They're like, I don't care what you do in the background. I just want my content to be delivered the way it should be delivered. So I use that services revenue to start building the content management platform. So we
Okay.
started in 2011, 2012. Yeah.
Mm. Uh, so how it used to happen before the headless CMS came in was that you would on a WordPress itself have all your content, and you could change the status that this is published or unpublished is because it's outdated, or something which is published, if it needs to be updated, then you edit it and republish it. That was how content was managed. Now, because you have multiple channels, so it would mean manual effort. Like, you first go on your WordPress to do it for your website, and then maybe you have a mobile app for which there is some other way to edit that data or unpublish or republish or refresh the data, the content. Um, so what you did was make it centralized at one place, which is the headless CMS, and that headless CMS is talking to a WordPress, talking to a mobile app, and uh, how does that updation of content happen? Like, does the
Yeah.
does the headless CMS send a update to a WordPress or whatever is the front end that this piece of content is updated and so it should be republished? Or is it that WordPress is not carrying any content anymore, and every time somebody visits a link, WordPress is dynamically picking up the content from the headless CMS real time and rendering it for the user? How does that how does
Yeah,
it work?
let me answer that. So you don't need WordPress.
Hmm.
what we did is, if you think of WordPress and what the example that you gave, where you update the blog post and it goes live, what WordPress used to do is, because of the web channel, like the way it was going to look and feel. So the for the techies out there, the HTML, CSS, the front end experience, which is built in HTML, CSS, how the website's going to look, is very hard coded with the content that was going to kind of fill in into that look, right? So it
Right.
was very like the whole software is made so the front end and the content is all together. It's like tightly
Right.
coupled, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to do mobile, you had no way to do it besides hacking the crap out of WordPress to send the same content to like a mobile website, mobile app, right?
Mm.
So what we did is like, all right, let's separate this. So we let you basically model the content. So if it's a blog page, you could basically say it has a title field, it has a description field, whatever fields you want. We'll let you do that. Drag and drop, you do that, and that's it. And then when you want to make a new blog, you fill out a form. Nothing else. You don't even care about how it's going to look. Okay. So once you do that, so for a content editor, they come in and they just create these content models, and then content entries is what we call it. So you create a content model called blog. It has 5 fields. Then you create content entries for that, which is where you're writing the blog. Okay. You can think about it. You can, with large enterprises, you can imagine the different type of content models that they would need, right? Now, in terms of the front end experience, like the website. So you take your blog and you want to, let's say, publish it to a website, and you want to publish it to a mobile app as well. Well, you just write the code for this website separately, and then you use our APIs to pull the content and paste it into that front end experience. So it's completely decoupled. So the experience is decoupled, and you develop that once for the web, and then you take your mobile SDKs and you develop it for the mobile. But the content stays the same. So for you as a content editor, go into Contentstack and you write a blog entry. You just see a form. It's nothing special. You just see a form. You fill that out. You say publish, and magically it'll appear on the front end website as well as on the mobile app, right? This is very simple. But fast forward, so a lot of these large companies, they have a lot of content challenges. So, you in this example with the blog, but let's say is a large enterprise. When you create a blog, they have to publish a blog to 80, 90 different countries all at the same time. So you can just imagine that. Okay. So how do you do that, right? So we created over the years, we caught up to everything that these traditional old CMSs provided for these large enterprises in a new way, in the cloud way. And the customers, it's like refreshing for them because they're not having to deal, like their tech teams don't have to deal with these old systems that you had installed, and then they have to upgrade. They have to go through these upgrade cycles every 6 months, and you waste energy, effort, and all the time for these techie people to do upgrades. Like, who does that? You will not believe it. Even to this day, their customers stuck with these old systems, and they're still doing upgrades. And finally, some of these companies say, "Hey, me too. We have an headless CMS." This is 2024, guys. Adobe AEM, Sitecore, you know, Tridian. Tridian actually don't even doesn't even say that they have an headless CMS. You know, like almost 10 years later, these guys are saying we have headless CMS. So it took them 10 years to realize that this is going to change, the whole CMS industry, right? So, anyways, that was the opportunity for us.
Um, are you are you now providing a full stack CMS, not
Yeah.
just the okay? So even the front end where it is rendered, what like the Adobe product does or a WordPress does, that portion of it also you provide. So a customer could opt for like a full stack solution or just for the headless CMS part of it, which is at the back end where the content manager or the content management team is creating and updating content.
We do provide that ability as well. So there's an additional feature where you could host your front end experience, right? So it's all
Mm,
just about hosting your code now, nothing else.
mm, mm, mm,
But
mm.
our approach is, in this, we call it the composable sort of tech stack, the composable architecture, if you will. So if you want to build an experience could be a web page, okay, website. The content bit could come from the headless CMS. There could be that you are making calls to other different services, specialized services. For example, analytics. So you just call another analytics player in your code. You basically write it and call Google Analytics. Maybe you have discussion threads. You use something like Discuss. You know, so you can compose the experience by connecting to these different technologies. So what our approach at Content Stack is, we will make that easy. We want you to take the best of the best and compose it all together, right? So we believe in this composable world, and what that allows the customers to do is, like, if one of the vendors that they're using for this composable, if there's another new better solution and they don't like this vendor because they haven't caught up, they don't keep up with the latest technology, they can literally just drop them and then replace it with a new vendor that is more, they feel comfortable that they'll continue to sort of innovate, right? So it gives them the flexibility to basically pick and choose the vendors. I think that's like a win-win, on both the sides. So the vendors have to constantly make sure that they're innovating and keeping the customer along the journey, and we don't end up with the case with Adobe and Sitecore and all that we are like 10 years later, they're still on this like old mess, right? So I think this composable architecture world is much better. And in this ecosystem, we sort of started this alliance called the Mach Alliance, which is like microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless technologies, right?
Wow.
With
Okay.
other vendors alongside, like e-commerce, there's commerce tools, and there's like 50 other vendors in this sort of alliance that are specialized on different services. And we basically have this promise that we all kind of work very well together so that the customers could like pick and choose and then, use build their tech stack. It's getting very techy here, but I think it gives the ultimate choice to the customer. And then to answer your question, we have headless CMS, but we are also giving the options for other things around the headless CMS. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to stop working with some vendors that are very specialized in that area. No, I think it's the choices with the customer. But there's some customers that don't want to work with 20 vendors. They just want to work with like a few. So for those customers, we want to provide some additional capabilities as well. And so we've kind of gone down this, like, what they call it, a digital experience platform route, where we're building and adding some of these like peripheral services that these customers need to build their experience.
Okay. Um, yeah, I want to attempt to understand this from a technical point of view as a non-techie.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of continue to probe you a little further. Um, let's take the example of, let's say, Flipkart. Uh, what So you said that you have like a composable architecture where a company can work with multiple tools and they all talk to each other. What would be the set of tools that a company like Flipkart would be working with, and where does content stack fit in that? And just give me like a more, like a 101 for content, like
Sure.
what is, so in the case of Flipkart, I'm assuming every product that is listed is a piece of content.
Absolutely. So Flipkart's massive right now, but when they, let's say, first, when they started, if they wanted to click, it's an e-commerce sort of website, right? So what do you need for e-commerce? Well, if you look at a web page, you have product information, product imagery, you have the cart experience, right? You have sort of the reviews and commenting. You have the payment, right? So all these could be specialized vendors. So I'll pick the whole composable thing for them. So it starts with content and commerce, most of this stuff, right? So Flipkart, I would say, it would start with commerce because that's their bread and butter. So you go pick a technology like Commerce Tools, which provides the ability to add all the SKUs and products into that system. It's all cloud based, headless microservices. Commerce Tools is a
Mm.
great company out of Germany.
Okay.
You Flipkart would pick that
I
that
haven't heard
that
of
company.
commerce. So,
Yeah,
typically, like when I speak to D2C founders, they talk of WooCommerce, Magento. Uh,
Shopify.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, are these similar to commerce tools?
They're similar. I think Commerce Tools kind of is very focused on these
Okay,
large use cases, complex use
okay,
cases,
okay.
uh, and
These
the
WooCommerce,
smaller
Magento are
D2C.
more DIY.
Absolutely, yeah. Shopify, like anyone can go in and
Yeah,
kind of
Shopify is
create it,
like
right?
the other extreme of DIY,
Yeah.
and this Magento and
Yeah, it's
WooCommerce
like
would
a
be somewhere in
spectrum,
the
right?
middle.
Like
Mm,
it's a
mm.
spectrum. So if you go to the right, it's like very like quick kind of things, and then maybe WooCommerce and all are kind of in the middle. The Commerce Tools might be on the left. But
Okay.
Commerce Tools basically has a very robust set of APIs that you could use to store all the product information. They
Mm,
handle the cart. I'm not sure, but I think they might do something around order management as well. But uh, if you don't want to use theirs, I'm actually not even sure if they have that. But there's other order management services that are API first that you could use. So you basically take Commerce Tools and you
like
can,
maybe a Shiprocket would have something
yeah,
for the
exactly,
post
exactly. So
purchase
you
experience would be possibly handled by Shiprocket kind of a. Okay.
absolutely, yeah. So
Mm,
so if you're Flipkart, right, you don't want to run a Shopify website,
mm.
right? Um, so you would pick these technologies that so your team is not building sort of the e-commerce engine. You'll just pick Commerce Tools.
Okay.
For payment, instead of you building the whole thing about payment across the world on Flipkart, just use Stripe or something like that. So you're
Right.
composing, right? You're just
Mm,
composing, and then what's the end
mm,
result you need? Well, you just need that experience, which is the e-commerce website. Now you say,
mm.
where does content fit in? Well, if you look at an e-commerce website, product information is one thing, right? The PDP page is what they call it, the product detail page.
Okay.
But if you look around, there's like help documents, there's about documents, you can just go in the footer
Policies
and there's
and.
all sorts of stuff that you have to do. So there's more than just commerce, right? Just
Mm,
for an e-commerce website, there's more than commerce. So all those content use cases, even for example, the product page, you might say, Commerce Tools has like 5 attributes that they store: the name, the title, the description, the imagery. But you might want to further, like, add content around that. So you could use Content Stack to do that with your product description page. And we have customers that use everything, WooCommerce, Shopify, Commerce Tools, all those with Content Stack, right?
mm.
And so Content Stack could be sort of this other sort of content thing that Flipkart could buy to manage the content, right? And these are large brands. We're completely focused on large enterprises. Most of the time, these companies have teams across the world, right? And different requirements. They have to manage different languages, and also manage personalization as well. So you can just imagine the content problem gets like multi-dimensional. Like if you want to release one content, a piece of content, let's say a website title and description, you got to do it in 80 languages. Okay,
Right.
not just that, you might have another like 10 layers of personalization to see if the text is better here or there, right? So some A/B testing stuff, and then you might want to personalize it for people in India versus people in US. So it just becomes multi-dimensional, and
Mm.
Content Stack provides all the tools needed for these large enterprises to manage all those things without like a large team. Like we take care of all that stuff for them.
Okay.
Also, I think one important bit that we take care for them is these large enterprises have massive load in terms of traffic, you know, we deliver that traffic anywhere in the world in like sub milliseconds. So, and we guarantee that content is going to be delivered wherever that content needs to be the closest, right? So we deliver these pieces of content in like less than 200 milliseconds. So
Okay.
that experience that shows up is like, like pretty fast, right?
Hmm.
So all those like hairy technology things we've already taken care of.
Hmm. Okay. Who's your biggest customer?
Um, so I should probably go. I never remember who I can quote, right? So
Yeah. Okay. You
um,
need a go
let
ahead
me just
from the
quickly go to
customer
the
to.
yeah. Well, Mattel. So I'm
Okay,
just
the
looking at
toy
my
company.
website.
Hmm.
Mattel is the toy company that have many brands, right? So you can just imagine how complex their deployment can get, and they use e-commerce as well, obviously for some brands. So we integrate with them. MongoDB, which is a leading software company, that also uses Content Stack. You have companies like Walmart. Walmart uses us for the marketplace content, not necessarily entirely Walmart.com site. So pretty much a lot of large enterprise, uh, companies that would find Content Stack as the right solution, and I would say more refreshing than sort of this traditional software companies, that they have to continually use because they've made so much investment over the years, and they realize that they're just like locked in, and these companies are not innovating.
Hmm.
So these brands have taken the plunge into like, hey, there could be a better way to manage this, right? And yeah, and they've moved to Content Stack.
Okay. Uh, do you see more use case of e-commerce focused businesses, or more use case of businesses which are using it for a marketing purpose? So, like say Mattel would be more marketing focused. Every piece of property would have like descriptions, and there would be probably stories around the toys, and there would be all sorts of stuff for every SKU that they have. So it's probably more of a marketing use case. So is that more common use case for customers who come to you, or?
I mean, we're a pretty horizontal sort of technology, right? It's awesome, and the GTM is harder, I guess, that for that, right? But no, it goes across the board. I think the e-commerce might be around like 20 to 30 sort of
Okay.
percent.
Okay.
There's gaming, there's airlines, there's manufacturing, there's finance. You could just name it. There's different use
Airlines would
cases.
be using it for marketing purposes or something else also.
It's marketing purposes. What about the digital signage that you see in the airports, right? So you have those screens that you show,
Hmm.
even the airline information that you see, right? So
Okay.
there's a lot of content that kind of comes from there, and then there's the real time like flight information that might come from a different system, but the
Hmm.
other content probably comes from Content Stack. So airlines actually have some interesting use cases besides just the website and the reservation system that they have, because they got to deliver this content to many screens outside of just the web page, right?
Hmm.
So it gets pretty
Okay.
interesting. Think about gaming. Gaming also is fascinating because we have some large gaming customers on our platform that deliver content around the world. All the people using console, all those imagery don't necessarily come from Content Stack. It could be some backend system that gaming company has done. But on the games, there's a lot of content around that comes from Content Stack, right?
Give me some
Um,
examples for the gaming use case.
yeah. So I mean, these these companies I can't talk about the specific use case, but I'll just say you playing a game, um, even the all the screens that you see, the information, the text, all that text and the images and stuff like that, could come from content stack, right? As you're playing the game, and then the motion, the 3D motion and all that, that could come from a different system. But just the text at the bottom, some of the images that you see, you know, it depends on that gaming company and the game and the tech team what they decide to put in content stack versus their backend systems. Thereby, they're just like composing that experience together. What we in the pandemic, it's everyone, I think, around the world in March of 2000, everyone hit the brake and we're like, what's going to happen, right? Literally in like a week or two, our traffic just went off the roof. And after that, we thought we're going to be okay. Like
Mm.
everyone's going to move to digital. And that off the roof was more driven through gaming to start with, and then we saw e-commerce take off, and everything kind of took off on the digital side. And I would say, unfortunately, a lot of companies got caught up in that, and wrong place at the wrong time, right? For us, we were at the right place at the right time, so we got lucky because our software and tech had matured enough, and then the world all of a sudden wanted to go digital, and they had to accelerate it. And what do you do? Like, content stack is the company that delivers content, right? You want to deliver a digital experience, you want content. So we kind of got lucky, I would say. It's not any genius here. And we took advantage of that. And a lot of companies basically, they had these old technologies that they could not pivot, but the world and the situation required them to pivot. So, it was like we saw that opportunity, right? And we tried to capture it as much as we could.
Okay. Um, I'd love to hear about the journey of building the product into an organization. So I'm assuming Content Stack would have been a product within raw engineering in 2013 when you conceptualized it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
tell me
So
that journey of making it into a company from just one product within raw engineering.
it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. Me as a techie and again early adopter of the cloud, just internal gut instincts were a lot of these things would move to the cloud. So we built content stack from the need, right? We saw that need and we built it. And I just like as I was going through the sort of building my business, my services business, somehow I just knew to anytime I started a new project, I would give ample time to those engineers, and it'll be usually one or two people. I'll carve them on the side because services business is like drugs, man. Like the money keeps rolling in, um, and you can hire more people, and the money keeps rolling in. At least at that time, because after the downturn, 2009, 2010, it started going up, right? So you need some sort of a discipline to carve out. It's very hard to build a products in a services company, right?
True.
I didn't have any like. This is just looking back. It's like, oh man, that move was pretty good because we anything like the simple CMS we wanted to build. It's like, hey, this idea. I just shot an email. I said, all right, let's take two people and give it a month, and this is what we need to do, and we'll revisit it in a month. And then month two will have some more goals, and every time you kind of achieve those, it's like, oh well, oh shoot, it's getting better. All right, let's go another month, let's go another month. In like 3 or 4 months it becomes clear that there's a product there, right? So we build a lot of products actually. So we built something very similar to Okta. For those that know Okta, it's a single sign-on solution, and I had done that in TIPCO for a project, and I'm like, well, if everything's going to be a SaaS service and companies are going to buy, enterprises are going to buy SaaS products, they're going to have a login problem. So we quickly did something very similar to build like a single sign-on product in 2010. We built a simple CMS. Then there was a thing called Cloud This. It's a product name that we came up with, and what that did was, it created this visual tool, like a drag and drop visual tool that will connect directly with all your cloud servers and kind of visually show you what the cloud servers are doing. And for that we basically wrote like an agent that would collect data. So you could just think of Datadog, which is a very successful company today. And we had this tech that we had built that would provide this visual sort of view, collecting all the data from the servers and show you in a very like um, you know visual diagram way. So that was a tool, and we incubated that for like I would say a year or so. So we ended up building a lot. Okay, I did not know how to do go to market. I just was a techie, and I just ended up building a lot of products. Some of those absolutely did not. We scrapped them, but the tech that we built there came, you know, in use for other things later on. So there was three main products that became successful in this journey. We built like 8 or 10 SaaS products. One was a backend as a service product. And for those that have been in this industry for a while, in 2012, mobile apps were like just everywhere. So we built a cloud service that you could build any type of data model, and we just gave you an SDK. So you were, as a entrepreneur, wanted to build a mobile app, you didn't have to worry about anything on the server side. You could just literally just build a mobile app, and we will scale everything for you in the cloud for all the backend services. And we did a lot of innovation there, and there were competitors at that time that got bought by Facebook and Google. Google, bought this thing called Firebase. Facebook bought this thing called Parse, and we were competing with these like small startups at that time. They got bought by these bigger companies, and I think I was at a disadvantage because I just didn't really know how to do go to market. I didn't have a salesperson. I'm just growing my business even after 5 6 years through just word of mouth, right? And so I had the products, and also I had the freemium. These are all freemium products. So I had a lot of developers on the platform. At Built IO backend, I had 40,000 developers at these accounts, and like almost like 10,000 apps that they had built on that product. But the revenues were like absolutely nothing, right? So it's been a long journey. I think the backend as a service product was successful because we were able to get 40,000 developers. I think. I think it failed commercially because we weren't able to either sell it off or monetize it, because I just didn't know how to do go to market. Um,
You
we didn't
said
talk about the
three.
iPads.
Yeah, three. That's what I was coming to. You said three products were successful. Simple CMS, which became Content Stack, backend as a service, and what was the third?
All right. So third, we get back to the iPads product that I initially wanted to build in 2007. Right. So fast forward to 2013, we again carved out a couple of people and said, can we do this graphical thing where you drag and drop cloud software, and then you just connect them, visually, and it would move data between them, right? So now take that failed project, cloud this. We took the tech that we built there and used it in this product, right? And the single sign-on stuff that we did to connect to all the SaaS, so we use that in this product. So the whole idea was to build the iPaaS, the integration platform, and the market was just right because there was so many cloud services. I think Zapier was also around, but Zapier was kind of focused on these like small use cases, and us being focused more on the enterprise on the services side, we're like, Mel, Zapier is not going to do it. We need like enterprise, integration platform as a service, and we did get inspired by Zapier for sure. But I also took a lot of my enterprise knowledge in the early days of the integration software company that I worked for, Tipco, and went down the iPaaS journey, and we built what we call Built.io Flow, and so that was the third product, and we had a few large customers using that for some interesting use cases. And so fast forward to 2018, there was a deal that there was a company as a
2018.
big.
All three were products within Raw. Built IO
They were all
Flow,
three.
backend as a service, simple CMS.
Yeah, they were all under the Built.io brand. So it was Built.io Flow,
Okay.
Built.io Embass, mobile backend as a service, and
Okay.
and Built.io Contentstack.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
so it was all together, and then we still had the services business, right? So it was just a mess of like this thing, and it was all bootstrapped still. 10 years,
How
11 years
much
into
revenue were
it.
you doing by that time, 2018?
Um, I would say around like 5-6 mil.
Okay.
That included the services and everything. The products were
Mm.
doing like reasonable, not like crazy.
Mm.
Because again, like, we didn't. I think our first salesperson we hired was probably around like 2015, 2016
Okay.
for services as well as the product. Like we didn't
Mm.
have sales for a long
This
time.
5-6 mil, what percentage was services? Like a lion's share or a.
Lion share, I would say like 80,
Okay.
80 plus percentage was services.
Mm. Okay.
I could be wrong here. I have to look up, but
Yeah, that's
it
okay.
might
I
have been
mean,
a little more than that.
mm.
But it wasn't like much, and it was sustaining. I was also finally after like 6-7 years taking some salary
Yeah.
and
Okay.
relieving,
Okay.
and then Neha joined me actually in 2012. She quit her job and then she
Neha's your
joined the same
wife.
business. She's my wife. She's the CEO of Contentstack right now. Joined me in this business, and she's like, "Hey, let me show you how to do go to market."
Right.
So she
Right. Right. Right.
she came on. It's like, okay, you built all this product, so like, okay, like we got to figure out how to sell this thing, right? So I think once she joined, I think the revenues started, ticking up. Um, there was a deal that there's a company that wanted to buy Built.io Flow, like buy that product. Um, and we went through it, and it was a good exit, I would say, right? And I had given ESOPs, by the way, to my, you know, early sort of partners that had joined us. I'd given them ESOPs back in like 2010, 2011, where in India they didn't even know anything about ESOPs, right?
Yeah.
And I actually gave that to them. I was like, hey, you just have to trust me. If this thing goes anywhere, you'll make a lot of money. And I have one request for you. It's like, don't ask me for crazy raises every year. Because I was giving like my average raise was like 30, 40% year over year. Because it was just like up and up and up, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they kept on asking me for the raise. And then I had no idea of the ESOP
Yeah.
till the 2018 exit that we had, right? Now they know everything about ESOPs.
Mm. Mm.
But anyways, I think that company that wanted to buy us, they just wanted to buy the Built Tire Flow product because it was, they had this integration need and they wanted the cloud integration product. But they didn't know what to do with Content Stack and the services business we had. And
What was
so
that company's core product, which the acquirer?
it was I mean, I don't think I can say the name, but it was a tech company and very successful company. They were doing, a bunch of different software in the manufacturing space. And
Okay.
it was an older sort of traditional company, and they had a few cloud products as well. And they wanted to integrate all those things with something modern like the Built.io Flow, right?
So this was
And
not a product to sell, but it was a product to augment their existing uh, solutions that they were anyway selling. They were not
no,
looking
they
at this
wanted
as
to
a
sell.
standalone. Or
They
they
wanted
wanted to
to
sell as
sell. So
standalone. Okay.
I go to this. So I had a meeting with the CEO and the advisor and it was just like this big meeting room, and I'm this like you know a nobody startup guy, and these guys are like a publicly traded company and billions of dollars, and they were grilling me for 2-3 hours, but they put up a slide that showed all their product and then integration was in the middle, and I'm just like, man, you guys want me. you know I'm like, why'd you put up that slide, so so that was interesting, but I think the CEO at that time, he wanted to own the product. He didn't want to license it, and we were so like, I personally, I was like, this thing is going to blow up. The integration space is going to be massive, and we don't want to sell this to this company. And they were offering us double digit millions, right?
Wow.
And bootstrapped, okay.
Mm.
um, and it was a good deal, man. After like 10, 12 years of like grind, it's like it can relieve not just me but all the other folks that had worked so hard to get to this place, right? It's like money that you would never even thought you would get. You would relieve that. So at the very end, they're like, yeah, we'll buy you for this. And I got around to, is like, all right, man, let's go. Like, we can build new products. Let's like figure out, take this and sell the whole thing. Okay. And then I get a call the next day and it's like, no, we'll just want to license it. So I went this
Oh,
from this like roller coaster of like, okay, I don't want to sell him this stuff, to like, all right, let's just go through it. I don't have to worry about my mortgage and everything is paid off, and the folks around us will also make a lot of money in India. I mean, they would have gone crores of rupees, right? Young guys. So I got around to that thinking as, all right, we'll create something new again. Okay. Next morning we wake up and then we're like, all right, let's, go through this deal. And they call us and they're like, all right, we change our mind. We just do license deal. So I don't know if it was like their strategy or whatever,
hmm, hmm.
um, and not knowing anything about that. So I went through this. We all went through this like roller coaster ride, and it was still a good deal. It was a multi-million-dollar license deal, but they took the source code from us, um, and and that was, it's like, I don't know if you want to sell that, but that money was good enough. And of course we did not, it was the product to that time, right? We also had a roadmap, that they didn't buy, right? So I was pretty confident. I think I got around to the fact that, and also they carved it out for their sort of side of world, which was very different than the world that we were going after. So I think we were okay. And so we took that money, and then we quickly realized these products have a lot more value you know uh, than the services company that's like around it, right? So we
Yeah.
took that money and we split the companies. So we split Built.io, Flow. The code that was a copy went to this other company, but then we accelerated the roadmap for the next year. Like, they just went down and accelerated the roadmap so we could differentiate, very differently, just in case if they decide to come in our territory, right? So we did that, but we have a new company now called Built.io. We have Contentstack, and then we still have the raw engineering company. Um,
And what
and
about
then
MBAS, mobile backend as a service?
the Ambas stayed within raw engineering, and we said
Okay.
we'll keep it as a niche product, and we still have that, but it's like more verticalized now in the sports world. And raw engineering is basically become a product company itself. There's no outside funding, and they basically are just creating sports applications. Um, so that's still going.
Okay.
Um,
And what is
Contents
raw engineering's ARR now?
Raw engineering is probably like around like 4 or 5 mil.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah,
And
and that's
and
just
so what kind of products are they doing? Like,
it's still the MBAS, but it's we call it digital fan experience platform,
okay,
and
okay,
it's to build sports apps. So it could be there is um, NBA. NBA is NBA, and a bunch of NBA teams are a customer. There's a bunch of other leagues within the basketball, um, sports around the world that are a customer. So it's like a fan experience sort of app, and there's a bunch of other services around that. So it's very niche. It's not a big market, you know,
so
but
it's
it's
like a
fun.
white labeled app solution for a sports business.
Absolutely, yeah. We
Okay.
have that, but we have a bunch of other services on top,
Hmm.
that
Okay.
we continue to sell. So it's not
So
there's not
like
a
what
lot of
a
competition because
commerce tools, you gave me the example of commerce tools. So this is something like that, but for sports.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and so I think the content stack and Built.io, now we have two product companies, and our management got split. I took Built.io, Neha took Content Stack as the CEO, and we decided to go raise capital because splitting one company into three, I think the operations, the costs and all kind of just go up, and it was all bootstrapped, right? So we decided to go the funding route. I literally just took two calls with VCs, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I was like, we can't do all of it together, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
so
mm.
we're like, all right, can we sell one, right? So we sold. So in that the other sort of deal where the CEO wanted to buy us, we had an investment banker. Okay. After that, this time when we decided to sell Built.io, we said we'll just try to sell it ourselves. And we did that. We created, or we basically just looked at the Forrester analyst reports and looked at the iPaaS world or integration. Who are the top players there, and that didn't have any cloud software, and we just started hitting them up. And I think, to our surprise, we got quite a bit of interest because even they at that now, after 10 years that the cloud was invented, they're like, shoot, we have to change our game, right?
Mm.
So we got a bunch of interested parties. We also had some Silicon Valley, like, known companies that were not in the integration space, but they were big enough to the where they wanted an integration engine as part of their stack. So we got some interest there as well. And we ended up selling it to a company called Software AG in Germany. So we
Okay.
did get our exit without any raise, like the double digit millions, right? But it took a while
Mm. Mm.
after that roller coaster ride.
When did you sell to Software AG?
I think it was 2018 or 2019. I
Okay,
can't
a year
remember.
or two after that. Okay.
Yeah, it
Mm.
was. I think it was like a year after that. Yeah, so it might have been
Okay.
2019.
Okay.
And Neha, of course, on the she being sort of the go-to-market person with Contentstack. Contentstack had some really good big enterprise customers already, and our competitor, um, had already raised money while Contentstack was in a services company, but they raised money and they educated the world what headless CMS is. So I give them credit for that,
Who's
But
your
when we
competitor?
this one in the headless CMS space, so there was a report from Forrester. So Forrester coined that term headless,
Hmm.
just headless, right?
Okay.
The whole headless thing that you hear in the tech world, it was from the CMS side, and there was a report from Forrester in 2014 that said, "Hey, there's this headless world, which is API first cloud stuff, and there's these two CMS companies. I think there was another one as well. I can't remember that company, but it's like Contentstack, Contentful, right? Are the pioneers in this space, right? So it's Contentful, and they in 2013 or 2014, I think they raised money, their first sort of big check. And they basically spent that money educating the market. Headless CMS is the way to go. And they were focused more on the developer side. We, from the very beginning, were focused on both the editor experience. So editors have to use our product as well as the developers. So our focus was both. So
Hmm.
when fast forward to 2018, we said, let's just focus on the enterprise. These guys are sort of down market. They're trying to get the masses, and they've already created this thing around headless CMS, and so we just doubled down on the enterprise market, and I think that was like the brilliant move because the enterprise at that point was ready now. Hey, we need headless CMS. Who are the vendors? And then we would come up, and we were absolutely ready for the enterprise because of our services experience. So we had
Hmm.
our customer service that was just excellent because we had that services sort of background. And these large enterprise customers, they need a lot of hand holding, and it's complex use cases. So you can't just say, hey, sign up for your free trial, right? And so I think that worked out for us. And of course, the pandemic was sort of the accelerator.
Hmm.
Um, so contest like we went and raised like 3 rounds. We got Series C. I think it's close to $180 million. So some massive investment went into this company.
Why? Why did you raise so much money? Like I can see you did your first raise was 2019 40-ish million, then 2021 close to 60 million, and then 80 million 2022. Um, you had that money from the sale of Built.io. Uh, did you need what did you need money for? Like this is that's what I want
That's
to
a very
understand.
good question. I think by this time, like a decade later, I think the importance of go to market to me was like serious, and then we had to get people that were smarter than us, and the timing we felt was just right. So everything else was sorted. Like I don't have to, these
Yeah,
with
the product
entrepreneurs, right?
is
There's
right.
Yeah, I think there's like this other thing as well, like where if you have a mortgage, you have credit card bills and all this stuff to deal with, and then you're running a company. There's a lot of stress, and you have to do a bunch of payroll and grow and all that. I think that exit kind of got us to, all of us, to like say, hey, we don't have to worry about that, and we have more, right? So now I think this bet that we have this other big thing, and the time was right, and we felt we got to accelerate everything, right? And we could kind of, yeah, we could use our money from the other sale and kind of still go by slowly. And I was also, not as young as before. So
Mm.
all those sort of things kind of came into the thinking, and we said, let's just accelerate this thing, right? And there was another thing. I think the Series C we didn't have to raise at that time. We had still a lot of capital. The
Yes,
pandemic,
80
like I said,
billion Series C.
80 million we didn't have to raise.
Mm.
But go back to the early days of my career. That experience that I had with the downturn of the dot com,
Yeah.
it just, for me internally, I always kind of have this like radar on when things are not right.
Uh,
Like, hey, this guy, has no revenue and is getting like 100x the valuation. That's just like, holy, yeah, this is coming to an end very soon, right? So it kind of built that in me, and that's why I was able to, I think, run a bootstrap company for a long time, and did all these things. And I think also that Series C, that it's like, hey, this is insane. VCs are still investing. We just went through 2 years of like crazy growth numbers. Let's just put it all together and lock the money in the bank. Um,
mm,
and if the market goes down, we will have that money in the bank. If it goes up, no worries, we'll continue to do well. So, and we were very conservative in our valuations and all that sort of stuff. We didn't play that game. There's companies that had less revenues than us. There was a competitor of Built.io, sorry, the iPads, that
mm,
got valuations of like billions of dollars, you know, um, but not as much revenue, So I don't know. It was all this stuff, and we ended up basically just kind of trying to secure and make sure that we are well capitalized for sort of the long journey, right?
mm.
Um,
What were you valued at in this Series C? Are you at liberty to share?
I can't share, but it's like close to, um, sort of the unicorn status, if you will,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Um, and again, I don't really care about any of that. I've been in this thing for 20 years. I want to build a company that's like long sustaining company providing value to our customers. I think I see a lot of people just get hung up on this like unicorn. Maybe it's more media, but
Mm,
as a founder, I really have no interest in that sort of label, if you will.
mm,
We got lucky again, in the sense that we didn't raise at a crazy valuation, knowingly and purposefully. So I don't have to build up my valuation to that if the market corrects. And knock on wood, I don't have to. At a conservative level, we're still pretty good. Um, and yeah, just think like 5-10 years out. What would you like the company to be? And it all kind of goes back to the customers and the value that you're providing, right? So I like that sort of thinking.
mm. Uh,
Then
Help me understand your uh, go-to market for content stack. You like you said, you sucked at go-to market, and you must have learned together. You and Neha would have cracked that code. What is the ARR now for content stack?
I'm not at liberty to share, but it's pretty high. I would say it's, in terms of like Indian sort of SaaS companies, we would be in the top, uh, sort of list of
Is it 50
revenues,
million
right?
plus, like between 50 and
It's
100?
50 million plus for sure, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I just don't want to share. Just
No,
people
that's
do all
fine.
this like,
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, yeah, the
um,
range is good enough. Yeah. Yeah.
yep,
Hmm.
yep.
So
What was
yeah,
the other
tell me
question?
about
Yeah.
how did you scale to this kind of revenue, to 50 mil plus kind of
Yeah,
revenue?
so that money definitely helped. I think the pandemic was sort of another accelerator, right? Because people started to realize they had to move fast, and our technology helps company move really fast. In some cases, it's like holy shit, like I'm stuck in this like old CMS world, and one website update takes me 2 months, and you can literally do it like you can do like 20 updates a day with our technology, and of course with low cost, you don't need massive people. So I think the value is pretty solid, right? It's just people need to try it out. So with that money that we took in, we hired some really good team that helped us kind of go to market and all that. And we were focused on enterprise, so we hired a sales team across the regions that we wanted to sort of compete in. So it's mostly US, Europe, and Asia Pac sort of got added later, and it's all SLG motion mostly. It's
What is SLG? Like, give me a 101 on that.
Yeah, it's sales led growth, right? There's a couple of sort of motions that people are in. There's also a hybrid as well. So sales led growth versus product led growth. I think the product led growth you can loosely tie with like freemium model, where you could just kind of come on the product's website and sign up for like free
Like
version, and then
Slack,
you could upgrade
Canva,
to
these are examples of
exactly
PLG.
exactly. So those are like PLG, product led growth, where people just use it and they like the product. The time to value is very short, and people usually they want them to go to the next tier where they can swipe their credit card. With the SLG motion, it's a little complex. So it's like traditional software used to be, where you had you know salespeople that with all the leads that would work the leads and inbound, outbound both. Although we get mostly inbound, with our marketing efforts. These individuals work with these customers, and our sales cycle is pretty long because these large enterprises, they have complex use cases. So it takes a while to work through that, and so it's kind of a slower motion, but it's bigger deals. Our
Hmm.
ASPs are upwards like close to
Average
200,000.
selling price.
Yeah, average selling price. So yeah, so
So
that's like the sales
you
led
said
growth, right? You have to have the
200,000,
team.
your
Yeah,
ASP. Okay.
yeah.
What is the difference between ASP and ACV? Average contract value. Like some founders talk of ASP, like you spoke of ASP. Some founders speak of the ACV, the average contract value,
Yeah, it's an annual contract value. So you could
annual
sign
contract value. Yeah.
for 2 years, 3 years, and then you just like take that and say what's the yearly sort of ARR revenue you would get, right? And that's
Mm.
important because you want to keep that customer for 3 years. So there's also the lifetime value of that customer that you need to track, right? In
Okay.
our business, I think the way we kind of run our business are there's retention and churn, right? You don't want churn, um, and because we're SLG and our customer service is like the best in the SaaS industry, our retention rate is like upwards of 97, 98%,
Wow.
which is unheard of, right? In
Mm.
large sort of enterprise, and even like, of course, on the the PLG, the small to medium size, I think the churn tends to be high because the smaller sort of companies that tend to kind of move on and things like that. But yeah, so we focus a lot on customer service, customer success, making sure that these enterprises that buy us get the value that that they need. And it's more, even our customer organization is very service oriented, and make sure that those guys are successful. And that once you do that, it just they keep investing in you, and then our products is keep getting better and better, and they start consuming more and more. So it's not just like that first time deal, but you want to make sure that they continue to get value, and keep spending more on your platform. So
Okay.
that's kind of content stack. That's how we operate. Yeah.
Do you typically like take like do a multi-year deal where you get them to pay upfront for a couple of years, or is it like annual?
It's a combination. We have a lot of multi-year deal, 3 years, even 5-year deals. It depends. I think obviously if you sign up for multi-year, you get a pretty good discount, right? So yes.
Okay, okay, understood. Uh, so is you know to achieve SLG, is it just about hiring a couple of good salespeople, or what else goes around it? Like, do you need to support them with marketing investment also? What kind of marketing investment? What, like, just help me understand that SLG from a holistic perspective. If I'm a founder who wants to do an SLG motion for my SaaS product, what all do I need to do?
Yeah, I think the first thing with SLG, especially for us kind of selling in US, and I'm based out of US, I spend most of the time there. Um, it's, these sales reps are not cheap, right? So you need funding. If you don't have funding, SLG motions are very hard.
Hmm.
I've seen companies do it out of India as well, which is good. It's a good sign, right? Like you could keep some of the costs low there, but it's still sort of a hard motion to have. So you would hire these experienced, account executives. Uh, you could start out small. You can kind of break up the U.S. region into two, or maybe you just like the time zones are, it's like 3, 4 time zones in U.S. Right? So having just one small team catering to the entire US becomes difficult. So I would say minimum two. You break it up into two, and then you hire these like account reps that in our case, these account reps had to be pretty knowledgeable and senior because the product that we have and then the customers that we're selling to, right, requires that type of
What is the difference between a sales rep and an accounts rep?
it's the same. I think
Okay.
you just have different. What we have is like we have just different levels. So we have AE, which is an account executive one, two, three, and we break them down into AE one would go after sort of the $1 billion plus enterprise, and AE two might be more mid market. We don't do small.
Hmm.
So and also it's kind of a graduation, right? So we have this program where we have our BDRs, which is the business development reps. These are individuals that we have a target list of customers or prospects that we want to go after, or ICP, if you will, right? Ideal
Ideal
customer
customer.
profile. We have that list, and then our BDRs will basically do the calling and the outreach and stuff like that, right? So those individuals tend to be really good sales folks eventually, right? Once because they have to learn your pitch of the product, and they got to pitch it, and get someone's attention in like less than a minute, and so they tend to become really good, and then they become, we have this like a few that have made it through the chain of actually becoming proper sales reps, right? And the one that I can think of, one of them still does the outbound, even though they get leads and they have to work those leads as a sales rep, right? And I found that fascinating because they're still hustling and they're still doing
Hmm.
and building the leads, right, by doing some outbound calls. So they tend to be really good. The ones that really
So
want to
the
become sales
BDR is
reps.
at the bottom of the hierarchy. These are people
Yeah,
who are checking, making a lead warm, and then passing it on. Like they would do a cold call and check, hey, would you be interested to know more? And if someone says yes, so then you have generated a warm lead, and then an AE or like an account executive or a sales rep will take over from there.
absolutely. And I think
Okay.
for us, I think 80-90% of our leads come in inbound.
Hmm.
It might have gone down because we're doing a lot of other sort of marketing activities as well. But once those leads come in, I think the BDRs kind of work through them.
Okay, they
Um,
qualify the lead to decide if
they
it's worth
qualify those
the time
leads.
of an AE or not. Okay.
Absolutely, and then it goes to the A's because the A's are, like I said, they're expensive. There's
Hmm.
also ramp up time because when you get a new AE coming into your company, depending on how complex your product is, there's a ramp time. You're still paying that person, but if the ramp time is 3 months, you got to pay that person 3 months or 6 months as well. So it takes time. for those
And
individuals to ramp up.
the way to build a BDR would be to hire for hustle and grit, right? You need people who are willing
Yeah,
to hear
and the
no multiple times. And
single thread is not going to work. It's like, hey, give me the leads, I'm just going to call them. It's not going to work. So you
what
want
do you mean by
someone that
single threaded?
single threaded is like, you're just on the phone, but
Okay.
you want the BDR that is going to go to the LinkedIn, find out about this
Mm,
this lead, do all sorts of different threads like LinkedIn and maybe blogs that person has written, and kind of find out more about that person and even the company, right?
mm.
And have the context, and then do the call or the outreach through an email or whatever channel. So it's like you got to be multi-threaded, and not everyone does that, right? At least
Okay.
in our world,
Mm,
you know.
okay. Okay. So that's what you're hiring for in a BDR. What are you hiring for in an AE? Are you looking at someone who's from the industry who understands the product? Or I mean, what's the hiring?
Initially we didn't, because then the ramp type is there. But I think to close, to get the ramp fast, it still takes time. Even if you get an AE from the same industry, they might know all the CMS and all that sort of concept, but then the way Contentstack sells it, they need to learn all that. So it still takes time. Ideally, yes, I think it would be good if someone already has the deep domain expertise. It does help, but we also like to go people from the outside because they bring sort of a different perspective. So it's a mix and match. I
But
think the
what are you
sales
hiring for? Like, if you're not hiring for relevant experience in the same industry, then what is it that you're hiring for?
grit,
Okay.
hungry,
How is it different from a
you know,
BDR? Like,
same. It's the same. It's just different part of or different. Not all BDS can be like a sales person, but it is a
mm,
good ramp for like a very young individual that wants to get into sales, right? And I've heard, we don't do this, but I've heard these large software companies and the training program that they put these BDRs through. Like, so I've heard this case where, the BDRs doing a call, and then everyone, maybe we do, I don't know, but all the BDRs are just listening, around them. Imagine as a young person kind of going through that, and you have to pitch it, and it's terrifying, right? But
mm,
if you go through that, you're building some muscles that are like incredible. The other thing is like you are building, which I wish I did in the early days, where you get a no, like, no, I'm not going to do this for you, it hurts your ego, and all that. Like, no, like, you get okay, and you get, like,
yeah,
you
you build
hear a lot, and
resilience. Yeah.
you build resilience. So I think the BDRs are like solid. I appreciate what they do. Some of those tend to kind of move up uh, the chain towards like selling, on the sales side, which is like they tend to be amazing.
But I'm not clear on the difference between the two. What extra does an AE have which a BDR doesn't have, or a sales rep
The
have?
AE has sort of the know-how. They build the relationships. They programatize, because you already have that, like a qualified lead now. Now the playbooks become very different, right? So it depends on the product, right? Our product's very techie. So you could have a very simple product. You might not need both those motions. But for our product, the AE, which is the sales rep, they build relationships across that whole, like the C levels, and then figure out the org maps and what are their
Mm,
pain points. They try to understand that, and then
okay.
they make sure that our product and demos are all lined up properly, and they get me on the call, or they get on at the right time. And so it's very complex sale on
Okay.
the enterprise side. And that's why it's expensive to build this motion.
Mm,
uh,
okay.
but enterprise sales, you need something like this.
Okay.
It's not just like a freemium sign up, right?
Mm, mm. So you have BDRs, you have AEs or sales reps, and then what else do you need for SLG?
Yeah, you need the sales engineers, right? So the sales folks are not necessarily, some of them tend to be very techy, but they need sort of I think one sales engineer support, a couple of sales reps. um, and these sales engineers tend to be a lot more technical because remember we are catering to the editor, the content editor as well as the developer. So there's a lot of techie questions that come through as well, and even the editor questions. So these guys tend to demo the product pretty well and answer all the techie questions and kind of assist the sales person in making that sale, right?
Okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
that this
What
is all
else?
before sales, and then once you
Right.
close the deal, then the whole customer success motion starts after that, right? And we basically we bought like 50 people. We carved out those people out of raw engineering, and contents that kind of tucked that in, like bought that into content sec after like 2 or 3 years, because our partners, content sec partners, they were like, hey, there's raw engineering and they're doing services for content stack. So there was conflict of interest,
Hmm.
and which definitely valid. So we wanted to make sure that they didn't feel that way, and we are giving business to all our partners. So then what do we do with that, all that knowledge, so we brought them into our customer success organization, so they don't help customers like write code, but they onboard the customer, they train the customer, they walk them through all sorts of architectural kind of discussions. They even help and enable the partner, like big companies like Capgemini and Valtech and all these EPAM. They help these partners with all our product needs, right? So this organization, we call it the Technical Solutions Organization, and they come into play after we close the deal.
Okay. Uh, what is the role of partners here? Do they bring in business, or do they come in after you have got business as implementation? Like you started raw engineering as an AWS partner. Uh, so what you would be doing is both, I guess. Some AWS
Yep,
clients, AWS might refer to you and tell you that help these guys implement AWS. Whereas in some cases, you would tell them, "Hey, I'll help you go to AWS," and you get business to AWS. So is it similar with these partners for you?
absolutely, yeah. And take me back like 10 years. I had no idea what to do with the partnership. Now we have to work all those angles, right? So these large SIs, and because we
SI
deal
is
with
a
large,
software integrator.
yeah,
Uh,
solution
So
integrator software.
solution integrator.
So
Okay.
so
Infosys, Wipro are SIs, right?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. These
Okay.
guys are they have teams that get uh, educated on these companies like Content Stack, and they know how to implement it perfectly and right and stuff like that. So EPAM, I think, has like 200 developers on Content Stack that they have trained, and there's a bunch of other Valtech and Capgemini and all these guys. They have many folks trained on Content Stack. So and the customers that we deal with are large organizations. They tend to have, sometimes they have small teams, big teams. It all depends, but a lot of them work with these large solution integrators to help them implement technologies, right? So for companies like Content Stack, it's important to work with these SIs, and it goes both ways, right? And we track that. We give business to them. Sometimes the customer already has an SI that they work with, right? And even Accenture and all these ones. So, and also sometimes they say, hey, do you recommend SIs? And so we work with some large SIs. There's also some agencies that we work with, and it goes both ways. We recommend for certain use cases. We recommend certain partners for certain use cases. We recommend certain partners. So it's a combination of both, and then sometimes, not sometimes, the partners also bring us into deals for certain use cases that they know that Content Stack is going to be a better fit.
Okay. I want to ask like a very 30,000 feet above the ground kind of a question. Uh, why not just do the implementation in house? Why work with a middleman between you and your customer for implementation? Why not just
Okay,
use
that's
the middleman for sales? You can always give them a sales commission, but do the implementation in house.
yeah. Remember that raw engineering had services and product all combined.
Yeah,
For some reason, our industry does not know how to value a company like that. I think there's some play with that as well. The services revenue, because it's usually project based, it's valued very differently. So a services company is valued very differently than a SaaS company
yeah,
with the ARR revenue, which is like electricity, right? Paying electricity
right,
bill. If you
right,
don't
right,
have a
right.
lot of churn, that money is just going to come in. This is interesting. Okay, I come from sort of a business family, right? And in my mind, business was profits and loss. Like you just have to go sell, and then whatever happens, expenses, and then January 1st, you basically start at zero because that year, January 1st, you have no revenue, right? The SaaS is very different. It's like I said, if you have $10 million of revenue last year, January 1st, depending on your churn number, in our case, 97%. So you know that you're going to lose 3 million, but 99.7 million is the revenue January 1st. So the value of a company like that is like crazy, right? This is a services company. January 1st, besides the retainers, it's the revenue is zero. So I think that plays a lot, and I think VCs don't like to have a lot of services revenue in a SaaS company, and I can see the reason why. Second, I think the partner ecosystem gets, you know, there's a conflict of interest, I believe. Although previously, before the SaaS world, tech companies would work with these partners and SIs as well as have a professional services team. But those professional services team would charge a lot higher than the SIs, right? So that's how they kind of. But for some reason in the SaaS world, it just does not look right. It's very few SaaS companies that I know that also does professional services. But that's a very good question. I think a lot of sometimes some customers ask us like, hey, why don't you just do it because you have the technical solution organization, right? And I do see that are that request and argument as well. But we got to balance all these sort of parties alongside that. So I think we've come up with a really good model where a TSO is alongside the partner, alongside the customer, and the TSO organization actually has solution architects. These individuals, uh, they live and breathe solutions on content stack. So they get assigned to accounts, they get assigned to partners, and we're making sure that these guys all are successful, right? So we've kind of come up with a good balance between all of them.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but would this lead to perverse incentives where a SaaS company may not want the product to be very easy to implement because the easier they make it and the more productized it is, the lower is the revenue opportunity for the SIs?
It is conflicting. It is conflicting. I don't think you consciously do anything. Maybe I'm naive, okay, but
No, I agree
I
with you. It would
never.
it would not be a
Yeah,
conscious choice, but
yeah.
incentives drive behavior. It's basic human psychology. We don't even realize it, but
Absolutely. I think sometimes it's misaligned. I think the SIs, they're driven by hours, right? So the knowledge, the usual thinking is like, they want like harder technologies and stuff like that. And I think in some cases it does come to me. It's like, why are you guys doing this, right? But for the most part, I think even the SIs, because they have to make the customer successful for the ongoing sort of relationship, I think they're also their incentive lies in the customer success. Yes, they have to drive revenues from ours, but I think it's like balanced with making sure that the customer doesn't get cheated. So the good SIs and the good teams, they're very well aware of that,
No,
and I think for the most
so
part,
I'm not
yeah.
saying the perverse incentives will affect the SIs, not at all. I'm saying they will affect the SaaS companies. The SaaS company has less incentive to productize further, to simplify further, to make it more DIY. Because the more you do that, the more you affect your partner revenue, and your partner is bringing in business to you.
I think it depends, right? Like, so we're at that stage now that there's no way we're going to think about that because we're big enough to where, for us, in my mind, it's always customer first, like customer value. Time to value to me should be like very short for and anything we do, right? Are we always successful at that? Maybe, maybe not. But our product and engineering thinking is around providing that value, right? So we never even think in terms of that. I think when you're small, you still like when you're small, you still have to have a product that's like amazing. Um, I just don't see that playing out.
It's, I mean, I've gone through a Salesforce implementation cycle, and it is such a clunky product.
Yeah,
Uh, it's not that Salesforce has some perverse incentive to keep it clunky, but I think that you just inside Salesforce you would not even be hearing it that your product is clunky, and because there is a system integrator who is making sure that the customer is not exposed to any of the clunkiness, and
yeah,
whereas there are a whole bunch of startups doing CRM continues to remain a category which sees multiple companies attempting it. uh, Someday
yeah.
there will be a better Salesforce which is more DIY, not as clunky, and that's just like it's like very hypothetical conversation, but that's just
No,
something I
but
was.
you're right. I think I mean these products inherently just get complex, right? So if you, it's like the paradox, right? Like you, as you get bigger, your product gets complex. You want to add more features, more products, more
Yeah, because
capabilities. I think it
what you
gets,
hear is feature demands, because your partners
yeah.
will tell you we need this feature, we need this feature. You will probably not hear demands of simplification as much as
I
demands of
think
features.
I think you do hear that. I think the business though, like Salesforce, it's not just Salesforce. They end up buying so many companies and integrating these companies, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
value kind of is all over the place, right? And
Mm,
the they've been around for more than 20 years. It's going to be complex, right?
right.
So there's no way around it. I would highly recommend this book called Innovator's Dilemma.
Okay.
You know, it gives you a very different view to, like, sitting outside. You can say these companies don't innovate or don't make their product better, but to your point, they're listening to their customers and partners and just adding features catered to them,
Yes.
um, and thereby making the product even more complex as they keep adding new
Mm,
features. But then they're like, oh well, this other company came by and it's a better technology and took this big company out. Well, those other companies are not focused on like these massive customers. They're focused on like whatever the new tech is and maybe some edge use cases. It just so happened that those things eventually become bigger and then take over this company, right? So it's this kind of balancing act between the
mm,
two. I've seen companies do both really well. There are companies out there that in the SaaS world, like Cloudflare, they're like at 1 billion in revenue and they're still showing 50% growth. you
mm.
know and
Right.
there are a bunch of them out there. I won't say a bunch of them, there are a few.
Right. Right.
Cloudflare,
Definitely.
Datadog, Mongo, these guys are like, they've kind of managed both.
Mm,
That paradox, they've managed it both pretty well.
mm,
So
okay. Interesting. Um, uh, Coming back to the SLG, I just wanted one last query in that. You said 80 to 90% of your leads are inbound.
yeah,
What does one need to do to reach that level of inbound leads? What do you invest
I
in there?
think
Is
those
it?
the marketing. So of course for us, like headless CMS is kind of the where everyone wants to move towards that. And these enterprises, they can't just they do their research and things like that. And of course, all our marketing activities, the brand awareness, the demand generation, the campaigns that we run, kind of drives a lot of that traffic, organic and organic both. So of course, you need dollars for that because you want to market to get that inbound flow, right?
How much of
Um,
that dollars is spent on pure performance marketing campaigns versus how much is on other stuff, and what is the other stuff?
hey, I'm still a product guy. I don't like have all
Okay,
those numbers in my head,
got it, got it,
Um,
got it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
but we do have, it's not like something absurd. Like it's usually in line with a lot of like enterprise sort of SaaS companies.
Hmm.
Nothing is like completely off.
I mean,
Uh,
I'm more like what I want to learn is besides spending dollars on performance marketing, what else do you do? Performance marketing is like a no-brainer. Of course, you need to do that, but what else?
I mean, the market for us, we're always concerned about our brand awareness. So the fact that our competitor was in the market and educating everyone about the headless CMS world, and also kind of went the small to mid-size, they're everywhere, right? Everyone knows them, and we have sort of a brand awareness challenge, and we always worry that are we on the table for all the enterprises that are in market trying to buy a CMS? And we're not comfortable saying yes. Like there's still companies out there that don't know us. So you know we're working through some of those challenges. What are the tactics that we can come up with, and make sure that we are there. Our brand is known, and it's not easy. Brand awareness takes a long, long time, and especially when there's a company that's out there doing this for a while, like even being number two, it's pretty hard, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
So
so
brand
besides that,
awareness
I
would be
think there's
like
a bunch of
this podcast is like contributing to brand
absolutely,
awareness, right? Probably you would be
man.
doing
Akshay, I'll tell
events.
you.
Yeah.
So I had this guy, okay, this kid come up to me and say, "Hey, you were so good at talking in front of people," and I'm like, "Really?" Like I'm trying to get better,
Hmm,
and it will maybe now you talk to me and it feels like I'm natural. I tell you, man, like till 45, I'm 47,
hmm,
till 45 I was still not, and I was working on it in my early 40s or late 30s, but it was not come natural to me.
hmm.
So yeah, so I think it's changing, and now I'm kind of putting myself out there and being on these podcasts. And also I think I have this like thing of like, okay, as you get you know sort of on the other end of your career, you want to you know give back wherever possible. And that's why I was telling you, is like I'm energized by some of these questions I was getting by some of these early founders and all the knowledge that they have, and I keep telling them
Yeah,
I had none of this knowledge when I started, man. And it was
so
like
true,
I
so
can sit
true.
back here and say I was this genius that I thought about all this stuff. It's absolutely not, man. It like learned along the way, you
Hmm,
know.
hmm, hmm,
So
Okay, let me end with this question. Uh, who is going to disrupt content stack? And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. So if you look at a company like say Adobe, now content stack is disrupting Adobe. Figma is disrupting Adobe. Different parts of their businesses are getting disrupted. Figma might have been seen. So let's take the example of Substack. You heard of Substack, right?
yep,
So Substack is like a newsletter tool. It's a very
for
small
sure.
market, very narrow use case, and Figma must have started
They've
like
done
that.
pretty well.
Yeah, I mean,
They've done pretty well.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So would you know who would disrupt content stack? Would someone like a Substack kind of a tool become uh, what the next generation version of a CMS would be, or what do you think?
I think
And I want you to remove
you're putting
yourself
your
as
finger
sorry. Yeah,
you're
I'm putting
putting
my
your
finger
finger
in.
on you're putting on your finger on like a topic that's like I think about like every single day, right?
Hmm,
Um, and again, as the companies grow bigger, there's a whole lot of challenges. We're still innovating. Um, but to your question, like, what do you do with these companies that come out of nowhere, right? And
No,
so
that's not my
there's,
question. My question is who will disrupt you, and I
yeah,
want you to answer
I'll get to that.
this without
I'll get to
putting
that.
yourself in the CTO role.
I'll get to that.
Hmm.
The Who's going to disrupt us, I think, is, again, like, there's two different motions going on. Okay, so the disrupt for me is always going to be these edge companies that we think it's edge. Okay, and eventually it kind of just takes over. But how do you find those things, right? um, the answer to your question is going to be content stack is going to disrupt content stack. That is, I'm
Right.
hopeful of that,
Hmm.
and I'm
Hmm.
doing things to ensure that um, we disrupt our own self. That's the
Hmm.
only way
Hmm.
we will survive.
Hmm. Uh, you know, uh, disruption typically comes from these edge companies, as you said. Who are those edge companies which could possibly be future disruptors?
Hey man, if I because I know Contentful's listening, our competitors listening. I can't
Uh,
get no. I'm just kidding. I think so. I'm very curious. I constant just as a techie, I still kind of keep looking at a lot of new things, and I'm on a lot of different like feeds and stuff like that. There's some interesting things coming. I think in my opinion, there's a tsunami like coming at us right now.
hmm.
Uh, as humans, I think overall, the AI like change that's happening
Yeah.
is insane. It is insane.
Yes.
It's tsunami that's not like 200 miles out. It's like right in your face.
You're at the
Um,
epicenter of that AI in content kind of a tsunami, right? Do you have
oh,
those built-in
absolutely.
tools now? Like a content team doesn't need to do anything much other than a few prompts, and the content is auto-generated.
Absolutely. And we're in 2 weeks, we're going to announce some like crazy things.
Hmm.
And remember the iPads that we built?
Hmm.
That same team came back from Software AG to Content Stack, and we built that whole solution in like 2 months. And we have a whole automation engine. And guess what? In AI, with an automation engine, it's like a game changer.
Hmm.
So the multi issue that I talk about with the content, where you create content, you got to translate it to 90 different languages, and then you got to create like 90 different variants of that, so you can see multi. But with an automation framework in AI, you could just automate that whole thing, right? And
Right.
so we're excited to announce this in a couple of weeks, and I think maybe before this podcast comes out, in our yearly conference that happens in Austin this year, the first week of June. We're announcing some really game changing sort of capabilities with AI, and it's going to provide the value to our customer. And we jumped on the AI thing like before our competitors and all that, and just me, like, I always have this like gut feeling and maybe some paranoia, that
Hmm.
these new tech will take you over. And
Right.
so, like I said, I'm always like trying new tools, and trying to apply it to the problems that we have, right? And if I'm successful, content stack will disrupt content stack, because the way I always look at things, it's like the problems are the same. It's very very rarely that a new problem sort of arises. There's solutions for problems. It might not be the right solutions. There's solutions for problems. When a new tech sort of comes by, you have the ability to squeeze like tremendous value out of a new solution to the same problem, if you know what I mean, right?
Hmm.
And that's how those companies are starting, right? The new companies are starting. And so it's important to be on those edges, because one of those tech solutions, the new tech solutions, especially with AI, might actually be the solution that we were, right? And would provide like tremendous value and will be gone. So I'd rather be that. Like, I want to make sure that we're there. Are we going to be successful? I don't know. We'll definitely give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Nishant. It was a real pleasure.
Appreciate the talk, Akshay. Thank you so much.